But there was little selfishness and much of courage in the heart of Mary Brotherton, so she presently forgot every notion of personal danger, and was thus enabled to see things as they really were. On one side of the small bare chamber, in some degree sheltered by the door which opened against it, stood a rickety machine once intended for a bedstead. Two of the legs had given place to brickbats, and instead of a bed, the unsteady frame now supported only a thin layer of very dirty straw, with the body of a dying female stretched upon it. The only other article of furniture in the room was an old deal box without a cover, but having a couple of planks, each about 3 feet long, laid across it, serving either for table or chairs as the occasion might require. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, and the remnant of a window were all alike begrimed with smoke and dirt. It took not long to make this inventory, and having completed it, the young lady, still holding in each hand a staring child, turned towards the inhabitant of this miserable den, and said, "Are you ill, my good woman?" The being she addressed raised her heavy eyes, and in a voice so low as to scarcely be intelligible, answered, "Yes." "Have you no assistants, nobody to nurse you?" "No, nobody but these," pointed to the children. "Has any doctor seen her?" demanded Mary of the eldest child. "No, ma'am," replied the little girl. "How long has she been ill?" "Ever since she cornered from the mill." "How long was that?" "A 12-month," said the little one. "I don't know," said the elder. "But, my poor children, you are not the only people that live with her, I suppose. Have you got any father?" "Yes." "Where is he?" "At the mill." "Have you got anybody else belonging to you?" said Miss Brotherton, shuddering. "There's Sophie and Dick and Grace," replied the eldest child. "Where are they all?" again inquired Miss Brotherton. "At the mill," was again the answer. "Are Sophie and Grace grown up?" "Sophie is," answered the child, "and Grace almost." "Then why do they not stay at home, one of them at least, to take care of this poor woman?" "'Cause they mustn't. I tends to mother." "You're not big enough to take care of her, my poor child. Why don't you go to the factory and let one of the bigger ones stay at home?" "They won't have me now, 'cause of this." And as she spake, the child held up a little shriveled right hand, three fingers of which had a joint deficient. "Can't piece now, so they won't let me come." "And Sophia won't let me go 'cause of this," said the little one, slipping her arm out of a bedgown, which was the only garment she had, and displayed the limb swollen and discolored from some violent contusion. "My poor little creature, how did you do this?" said Mary, tenderly taking the little hand in hers and examining the frightful bruise. "'Twas the billy roller," said the little girl, in an accent that seemed to insinuate that the young lady was more than commonly dull of apprehension. "But how did it happen, my child? Did some part of the machinery go over you?" "No, that was me," cried the elder, with a loud voice, and again holding up her demolished fingers. "'Twas the stretcher's billy roll as smashed Becky." "'Twas 'cause I was sleepy," said the little one, beginning to cry, for she construed Mary's puzzled look into an expression of displeasure. "They beats 'em dreadfully, ma'am," said the sick woman, evidently exerting herself beyond her strength. "She's a good little girl for work, but they will fall asleep, all of 'em at times, and when they be kept so dreadful long." "But these bruises could not be the effect of beating," said Mary, again examining the arm. "It is quite impossible." "Why, ma'am, the billy roller as beats 'em with is a stick big enough to kill with, and many is the baby that has been crippled by it." There was something so hollow, so sunken in the woman's voice, that Miss Brotherton felt terrified. The fact that a child of the size of a baby before her should have been beaten with such a weapon, and with such violence, seemed wholly incredible. Again she thought of Sir Matthew Dowling's warning, and wished she were not alone. "I am afraid that you are very ill," she said, "and I do not know how I can help you. Money I can give, but there's nobody here to make use of it for you." "Money?" murmured the sinking woman from her layer of straw. "Money? Can you give money? Oh, give it, give it, give it to her. Give it to the child, for she knows what it is. She knows that I am dying for want of it. It is too late for me, but give it, and may God—" Here the miserable creature's strength wholly failed her. Her eyes closed, and to all appearances she was already a corpse. "Oh, this is very dreadful!" cried poor Mary, wringing her hands. "Nurse will know better than me, and so saying, she turned eagerly towards the door. She be gone, mother, and haven't given her, and she be gone, mother, and haven't given nothing, the elder child said in a voice so mournfully expressive of disappointment that spite of her alarm, Mary stopped to take a half-crown from her purse, which she put in the child's hand. She looked at the coin, and in a half-whispered ejaculated, "Oh!" Then, creeping to the bed, she put it into the palm of her mother's hand, pressing the fingers down upon it, and in an accent of interrogation uttered the word, "Bread?" This Mary heard, but not the answer to it, for she had quitted the scene before it was uttered. On opening the door of the house, she stared at seeing Sir Matthew Dowling still within a dozen yards of it. He was waiting beside the carriage, with one arm extended to keep the door of it open, and the other resting against the vehicle on the opposite side of the opening, while his head thrust forward within an inch of good Miss Tremlett's nose, effectively preventing her following her young lady, however much she might have wished to do. He had, indeed, upon Miss Brotherton's disappearance, reseated the good woman, almost by force, then addressed her in such a strain as was rapidly working her up to make an attempt to escape from the other side of the carriage, when the reappearance of the young lady released her from her thraldom. "Miss Tremlett," he said, "are you aware of the awful responsibility which will rest upon you if anything unfortunate happens to your amiable but most headstrong young lady? All the neighborhood know, Miss Tremlett, that she has, as it were, placed herself for protection in your hands, refusing all other counsel, and shutting her ears to all other advice. It is thus that you perform your duty." "Good God, sir, what do you mean?" said the good woman in great agitation. "Let me out of here, if you please, sir. If my young lady is in any danger, it is wicked to keep me sitting here. Let me out, sir." "I will let you out, Miss Tremlett," replied the knight, firmly retaining a position where he so effectively kept her in. "I will let you out, but first, for her sake and your own, it is my duty to tell you in a few words the sort of place she is now thought proper to enter. Don't struggle, Miss Tremlett, but hear me. It is not possible they can do her any personal injury as long as I am so near the door of the house at present. Be very sure that from some hole or corner of the filthy premise, some spying eyes are at this moment watching us. There is no danger of her being murdered now, but as sure as you sit there, Miss Tremlett, murdered she will be, if she goes without protection of a powerful arm within such dens of sin and iniquity as she has entered now. One short moment more, Miss Tremlett, one short moment, while I tell what creatures are among whom she has thrown herself. The house is notorious as one of the very worst in Ashley. The man is a habitual drunkard, whom I and my excellent servant Parsons have endeavored in every possible way to reform, but in vain. The moment he has got his wages, he goes to the gin shop, and often he won't work at all, which of course prevents his family from being in the comfortable, easy circumstances which they ought to be. If he happens to be in the house now, I dare say there's no space of indecent language to which your young lady will not be obliged to listen. As to the mother of the family, I believe she is dying in consequence of a life passed in all sorts of the most abominable wickedness. Indeed, I believe she is now half mad, for I have been told by some of my people, whom I have sent upon charitable visits to inquire to her, that she lies in her bed, inventing the strangest lies imaginable. Indeed, some think that notwithstanding she is so near death, she still drinks, and that is nothing but drunken lies that she makes people listen to. Pray let me get out, Mr. Matthew. Being murdered, sir, is not the only thing from which I should wish to save Miss Brotherington. One more word, Miss Tremlett, and I have done. The eldest girl is a notorious prostitute. Another, a year younger too, is going the same way. The boy is suspected of being extremely skillful thief, and the two younger girls, for they all work at my factory, Miss Tremlett, I know them well, the two younger ones are such depraved little wretches that for the sake of example we've been obliged to turn them out of the mill, though we are in the great want of young hands to do work. Now, madam, I have done, and I leave it to you to judge how far it will be right and proper for Miss Brotherington to continue with such frolics as these." Sir Matthew was in the act of pronouncing the last words of this speech as Miss Brotherington opened the door of the house and stepped out onto the street. On first perceiving her, the knight appeared about to take her hand for the purpose of replacing her in the carriage, but his attention was called to the sound of many feet suddenly turning the corner of the street which led from a neighbouring factory. It proceeded from the work people, who were rushing home in a scrambling haste to snatch their miserable dinners. Gentlemen in Sir Matthew Dowling's situation, and enjoying the species of influence which belongs to it, take little or no pains to avoid meeting the people they themselves employ. They look not in the young eyes to read what sort of blessing cowers there, nor heed the crippled gait, or the pallid visages of those who exist but by the poisonous employment which he gives them. But such gentlemen seldom, if they can avoid it, expose themselves to the remarks of any gangs belonging to their neighbours, and no sooner did Sir Matthew become aware that the mill in the next street was pouring forth its 1,500 hands, than he turned from the young lady who had passed by without appearing to see him, and taking his horse from the hand of the groom who held it, sprung with great activity into the saddle, and galloped off the way his indignant son had galloped before him. Mary Brotherton, meanwhile, was utterly unconscious of the approaching throng, intent only upon getting Miss Tremlett out of the carriage, turning her eyes neither to the right nor the left, but seizing her by the arm, exclaiming, "Come to me, nurse, come to me!" The good woman, who was quite as desirous as herself of the reunion, required no second summons, but more quickly than it can be told, was first by the side of her young mistress in the street, and then entering with her the low door of the dwelling so fearfully described by Sir Matthew. Had Miss Tremlett possessed the power, most assuredly she would have turned the steps of her charge the other way, and forever have prevented her from exposing herself to the contemplation of such depravity as which she had heard described. But knowing perfectly well that no such power was vested in her, the next wish she conceived was to give all her assistance and support she could to the dear wilful girl whom she had devoted herself. Aware as she entered the door that many eyes followed them, nay, that many steps were stayed, apparently to watch the spectacle so rare in Ashley of well-dressed ladies entering the sordid dwellings of operatives, Miss Tremlett herself closed the door as soon as they both passed through it, and looking around on the desolation of the chamber, trembled with an emotion made up of terror and compassion, at perceiving to what a scene the delicately nurtured Mary Brotherton had introduced herself. "This woman is very ill, Nurse Tremlett," said the young lady, drawing her close to the bed. "For God's sake, tell me what we had better do for her." "My dear Miss Mary, come away and send a doctor to her," answered Miss Tremlett, positively shaking from head to foot as she contemplated the ghastly countenance of the woman, the filthy rag that imperfectly covered her, and the scanty straw upon which her stiffening limbs were stretched. "This is no place for you, Miss Brotherton. Come with me, I say, this moment, and we will send the doctor, and money, and clothes, too, if you like it." If I like it? Do you think I am amusing myself, Miss Tremlett? Feel her hand, feel her pulse. I believe she is dying." These words, though spoken very quietly and deliberately, were uttered in a voice so unlike what she had ever heard from the young lady before, that the old woman became dreadfully alarmed. "Oh, good God! She is losing her senses," were the words she uttered as she threw her arms round the person of Miss Brotherton, and vainly attempted to remove her from the spot on which she stood. "Fie upon you, Miss Tremlett," said Mary sternly. "Do you fancy that you are doing me any good? Be satisfied that I am not losing my senses, and let me request that you will make an effort to recover yours. This woman's head is too low. My dear mother asked for pillows." Here the steady voice faltered, but now it was only for a moment. "I want the cushions from the carriage, Nurse Tremlett. Will you get them, or shall I?" Without uttering a word, the terrified old woman hastened to obey her, and did so in the best manner, for, calling to the tall footman, who continued to stand beside the open door of the carriage, he obeyed the summons, which he supposed to be preparatory to his young mistress making her exit, but by very unceremoniously thrusting right and left the curious group that still lingered on the threshold. "Give me the cushions for the carriage, Jones," she said. "Make haste, for God's sakes." The man stared at her for an instant in utter astonishment, and then did as he was ordered. "Now get upon the box, and bid the coachman drive as fast as he can go to the nearest doctor's. That's Mr. Thomas, I think, in Cannon Street. Tell him Miss Brotherton has sent for him, and desire him to get into the carriage directly." Having uttered these commands as rapidly as she could speak, Miss Tremlett carried a couple of the carriage cushions to the bed, and with the assistance of Mary and the elder child, managed to raise the woman into a position apparently less distorted and painful than before. "Have you anything to give her?" said Miss Tremlett, addressing the child. The little girl, without answering, stepped to a sort of cupboard in the wall, and taking thence a pitcher without a spout, and a mug without a handle, contrived to tilt up the former so as to make discharge a portion of the contents into the latter. It is water?" said Mary, watching the operation. "It will not hurt her, will it?" "Nothing can hurt her, my dear love," said Miss Tremlett, her eyes filling with tears as she listened to the altered voice of the gay-hearted child girl, whose smiles and frolics she had watched and indulged for so many years, but of whose deep feeling she had never conceived any idea of till now. "I don't think anything can hurt her now, Mary. Her pulse flutters, her forehead is quite damp. I have sent for Miss Thomas, and he will probably be here immediately." Mary's only answer was silently pressing the hand of her old friend as she took from it the broken mug of water, and then, kneeling on the sordid floor, she applied it to the pale, dry lips of the sufferer.